This is Social Realities with Dr. Med. Let's get it cracking. Today I want to talk about Real Housewives of New York City cast member Brynn Whitfield. The first reunion episode for me this season was very sad and very contentious. Um, it was volatile, and for the most part, everybody looked uncomfortable to some extent. And I want to talk about Brynn in particular because Brynn occupies a space that I think we understand or we know exists, but we don't think about the implications or, as I like to say, the social realities of the space. So Brynn identifies herself as Black, but she also considers herself biracial. She's had a tumultuous childhood. Her brother also looks phenotypically like he could be white. And while I know that she is a Black woman and I have family members that look like her and are related to me by blood, I also understand that there is this trope and this type of pathology that sometimes occurs when biracial children who are Black and white have to confront and deal with a sense of belonging. And so, in thinking about what she's been experiencing on the show and just the way she moves in general, she is reminiscent to me of many young women who I have met throughout my career who identify as biracial, want to embrace the Black community, but also don't want to denounce their own white heritage from whichever parent. And there are times when that white heritage doesn't accept a Black child. And then there are times when the Black community doesn't accept a child that's biracial. That's not as often because I think the tension is around the notion of whiteness, and being anything close to Black when it comes to notions of whiteness is considered inferior. And we can go back as far as 1932 with, the movie Imitation of Life. That was in 1934. And actually, 1934 is the year my mother was born. And so, in the show Imitation of Life, you have this young lady, Piola, who looks white, but she's Black. Her mother is a Black woman who works for a white family, and she's a live in. So, Piola lives with the white family, and she looks like she could pass for their kids. So, she spends a lot of her life passing, going to the better schools, and being able to have access to white boys and date white men, and go in spaces where her mom can't go unless she's with her and she gives permission for her mother to be there. And it's a really sad state of existence when you think about it. And while this is happening in 1934, it's also still happening today, and I think we don't talk about it as often because there is a larger biracial community. But I have worked in institutions where those kinds of things, those kinds of challenges, and those kinds of ways in which people see themselves can be very destructive to their self esteem, to their sense of worth. I've literally had to set it off on Black people who think that light skinned people with long hair and blue eyes aren't Black enough to consider themselves Black. And then I've had to also check white folk who think that biraciality is this like cool ambiguous space that's like awesome, and it's almost like for them, this person becomes a trinket or a token or something to play with. I've seen it all. I've seen people denounce their families because of racism. I've seen these kinds of things. And what I think Brent is experiencing is an identity crisis. And it's not just an identity crisis about being a mom. It's not just the identity crisis about career. It's not just the identity crisis about being married. It's complicated because her identity crisis is almost also very much tied into her racial, her ethnic background. So having those kinds of experiences, being a biracial person, sometimes there's no space where they feel safe to really talk about their experiences. And a lot of times, just like in the movie Imitation of Life, you're living these different kinds of life, these different kinds of lives. And the same way reality TV plays out and people have personas, people also take on personas when they are in these ambiguous racial and ethnic spaces. So, for example, if a young lady, and I've met several young ladies whose moms were white, and so they want to join the white sorority, and they date white boys, and they have issues with black men because their father perhaps left them or whatever, or they are biracial and their mom is black but their dad is white, and so the dad adores them but his family has a problem with it because of the notion of a white man being with a black woman and producing a child. And it's all of these kinds of things and messages and cultural signals that give them a sense of isolation and exile. And I think that's what Brynn is also experiencing. And I'm not sure if she has that safe space to share who she is and what she desires, but I pray she gets it. And while we are looking at Brynn, and while we find her behavior, I find her behavior problematic. Her actions are problematic. What she says out of her mouth is problematic. She's a bit over the top when it comes to a lot of different things. But what I also recognize is that there's this little girl inside of her that needs to be healed, that needs to develop and grow and mature. And there's a level of emotional intelligence that she needs to acquire, so that she can battle some of these demons she's fighting. And I want to critique without being cruel. And so I also encourage you that if you hear me say something that you feel is cruel, or if you hear me say something that's out of pocket or disrespectful to someone's humanity, please let me know, because I have no problem apologizing. We are all works in progress. We are all under construction. And in this particular moment, I wanted to discuss Brynn in hopes that she knows that there is a community out there where she does belong. There are people where she does fit. She will find her people. She needs to dig deep within and heal a lot of the things that she's experienced. And I think she'll show up much differently at the show. But once again, what's juicier than gossip and drama? Somebody overcoming something. And I feel like if Brynn could share her journey with us of what she's experienced, feeling like she's a part of different worlds, feeling like, she doesn't know where she quite fits in or belongs, or how she's, passed in certain socioeconomic spaces and she hasn't passed in other spaces. I would love to see that kind of thing play itself out on television, because that's what we call real. What do you think? Is this too much? I mean, I know this isn't fun and juicy and tea, but I think that there's something about us watching these shows that they're a reflection of us, whether we like it or not, because you only are attracted to something that resonates with you. And so, what are the lessons we need to learn from this? Does anybody have any stories or experiences or ways to combat this notion of ambiguity when it comes to race and identity? Let me know if you do. What do you think? Like and subscribe. This is Social Realities with Dr. Med. Deuces.